And while we are waiting for questions, maybe we could start with one. So based on your experience, based on this evaluation, what are some of the features that make network organizations effectively functioning?
Well, I think if we go back to those 8 elements, which we quoted, I would have to say that all 8 of them in many ways have equal importance. So, for example, the membership itself, if there is not a critical mass of members that are connecting, then that seriously undermines a network's ability to exchange information. So I think in this particular case, what we found as one of the challenges, as was very visually demonstrated from the social network analysis, was that connectivity between members is very important. So even if you are part of a network, and if you think, for example, many of us might be part of social networks like Facebook or Twitter, if we are there but simply observing, that's fine. But of course, the value of that network comes when you are exchanging information. And one of the underpinnings why connectivity was not happening in the case of the GEF-CSO network was constraint on resources. So I would suggest that that's another element that is quite important for a successful network, is the resources need to be there to support the network.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. So we start getting first questions. So the first one is from Donovan McLaren. Thank you very much. So is there a process where civil society organizations can be a part of the network with a national focal point in Jamaica? Very specific.
There was no national focal point in Jamaica.
A question, is there a process where CSO can be part of the network via their national focal point in Jamaica? So CSOs, the way, I hope I can answer this question. The way that if you are a CSO, belonging to a CSO, the way that a CSO becomes a part of the network is to contact your regional focal point. So first of all, you could go to the CSO network website, which is GEF-CSO.org, and the network representative in your region is listed there. You would then contact that person and request to become a member of the GEF-CSO network. Now, the criteria, as I mentioned, have become more formalized over the years, and we suggest this was a good thing. Requires that the organization must be working in one of the focal areas that the GEF works in, so broadly area of sustainable development, that the organization should be in existence for at least 3 years, and it should have the financial statements, audited statements to demonstrate its fiscal and fiduciary responsibility, and share all of that with the regional focal point in the Caribbean, who one of our colleagues has just shared with us is Patricia Turpin of Environment Tobago. So that would then be reviewed by Patricia. She would then send it to the Secretariat of the CSO network, and your application would be considered.
Thank you very much, and thank you for a comment also online. We have a couple of questions about the presentation. Yes, the presentation will be made available from our website, so please check our website shortly after this webinar. So please, if you have any more questions, we are ready we are looking forward to have more. Please type your questions through the chat room. And perhaps we can continue our discussion. So one of the conclusions of evaluation was that, one of the recommendations was that the network would need to find ways to become closer to the countries and to the regions. What are some of the ways, what are some of the opportunities for them to get more involved on these levels?
Well, one of the ways that the network is exploring itself, and this was mentioned, is that the network recognized that this is a problem, that they are distant from the country level. So it has put in place and made efforts to establish what are called country contact points. And these are individuals in countries that then are responsible for liaising and dialoguing with the CSOs in that country. So right now, or at the time of the evaluation, there were 122 countries that are part of or who have members in their countries, but only 20 countries have country contact points. So this is something that the network has in its objectives to try to expand those country contact points. I think one of the challenges for the network is that the regional focal points, the country contact focal points, the Indigenous peoples focal points, these are all representatives, they are organizations that are working on a volunteer basis. So you can imagine if you are an organization that has its own work mandate, to then reach out to, and in some regions there's more than 10 countries, to be able to reach out to individual CSO organizations at the country level is rather challenging. So, so we think that this question of what is the supply that the network can give to the network, what is the demand that the network has, can hopefully result in a type of agreement between the partnership and the network, so that there are also some resources to support that country level outreach. And the council, the GEF Council, at the end of this evaluation, I forgot to mention this, in fact has established what they call an ad hoc working group. So rather than make a decision at the time this evaluation was presented, which was in June 2016, a group of council members, board members from 5 different countries have formed a working group to consider what could be the expanded vision for the network and what could be some of that supply-demand dynamic.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And we have a follow-up question to which you, I believe, already started responding from Lloyd Gardner. He says that low level of participation in networks seem to be the norm. Is participation in the CSO network below the norm? So if so, what are the suggested motivators beyond country focal points?
Well, unfortunately, we weren't able to, and it was outside of our mandate to do benchmarking with, to a significant degree, with other networks. But in our experience, the CSO network of the GEF is organized a little bit differently, with a heavier reliance on the regional focal points. So as you may recall, that diagram of the social network analysis that I shared, in fact, there is high participation, but it's localized amongst the regional focal points and amongst the management. And it's lower as you move further away from the global environment and more to the national environment. And in terms of what are the motivators, again, I come back to that supply-demand dynamic. I think the motivators are, first of all, the network needs to do an inventory of what are the skills within this network. And then once that is understood, that can then be presented to the partnership. This is what we have to offer to the partnership. And the partnership can, look at, well, we can ask, for example, for monitoring services or, one of the original visions of the network when it was formed, and this was a statement that the first CEO of the GEF made, was that they really viewed the network as the eyes and ears of the GEF. You cannot be eyes and ears of the GEF if you are so far away from what is happening. So I think that understanding of what are the skills that are present within the network, and then a discussion amongst, at a higher level, about what does the partnership want from the network.
Thank you so much. So we have actually another question which is connected to what you were just saying, from Zlatko Samardziev. So regarding the conclusion, what would be the current overall purpose of the GEF-CSO network?
So this is, so it is as it stands. The council gave the network an objective in 1995, and it hasn't changed since then. It's been more than 20 years. And that objective is to prepare for and report back on the council meetings. That's it. That's all the council at that point in time said it wanted from the network. The network itself has given itself some objectives, which were to strengthen the role of civil society in the global commons, to enhance GEF programming with CSO participation, and also to enhance the capacity of the network itself and of its membership. So those are the objectives that the network has set for itself. And if you go, on their webpage, GEF-CSO.org, you'll see what is their mission, what is their vision, what is the objective. Now, this working group that I mentioned, made up of 5 council members, is now beginning to update that 1995 mandate. So that vision, that objective, they're expected to deliver their findings or their report in October of 2017, if I'm not mistaken. So at that time, the council may have a new objective for the network, but the network objectives for itself have not changed since their last strategic planning orientation.
We also have a participant online, Carol Brook, who wanted to ask a question using the microphone. Carol, the microphone is yours. Please go ahead with your...
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I actually have 2 related questions. It follows on nicely from the remarks just now. One is not so much how the network views itself, but how do the members view their role? Why do they participate? Are they trying to, is there self-interest? Are they trying to steer GEF investments or action? Are they trying? But what are the different motivations for the 474 members? And related to that, as you noted, the network's been around for more than 20 years. I imagine a lot of the people that brought their organizations into the network have moved on, and there have been replacements and replacements to the replacements. In that inheritance of the position, if you will, have you seen any effect? Because what you are describing in some of the challenges of the network, the identity, the common ground, This often happens in other networks where they've been going for a while and there's been a change in the individuals who are participating.
Yes. Okay, let me try to take those one at a time. In terms of the motivation and what is the value that the members get from being in the network, as I mentioned when we were describing the network, the main function and the main benefit that members get is to disseminate information about the GEF. So there are a lot of organizations that are still understanding the GEF. So in that sense, that core educational function is something that the network provides, and this is provided through the reports that are prepared by the regional focal points at the council meetings and then disseminated to the membership. As well, the network organizes what's called a CSO day as part of the expanded constituency workshops. These are regional workshops that the Secretariat organizes to update countries, government representatives on agency representatives on policy updates of the GEF, and the CSOs are also invited to those meetings so that they can have a face-to-face dialogue with government counterparts, but they have a day beforehand, and that day also serves as a core educational function. In terms of the changing membership, you're quite right. Like, as you can imagine, 20 years ago, some of the more prominent members of the GEF-CSO Network were the international NGOs like IUCN, WWF, BirdLife International, Conservation International. They were very prominent and active members of the network at that time. Since then, as the GEF has evolved, those organizations have taken on the role of executing agency. So their education or their awareness of the GEF is extremely high. Some of them have gone from executing agency to actual proper GEF full-on implementing agency, and I spoke about the potential confusion and conflict of interest that is now there as a result of that. So, so all of this has had an impact on the membership, its needs, and what you see as being the membership of the GEF now are a lot of organizations that are country level. There are, of course, the international CSOs, but there are many more national level CSOs. And another one of their motivations is, as you might imagine, is GEF funding. And so they're trying to understand how they can get involved with a GEF project. So I hope that answered your question.
On the first question, I think that what I'm really trying to get at is not how we view it or how the network views it, but when there are so many demands on people's time, people participate in many different networks, to have them invest the time, it's a question of what do they get out of it? What's the benefit for them? And educating the public. Go ahead.
It is a question for them. And I mentioned perhaps too much in passing, but the network is really, the management is very challenged right now in terms of getting participation from its membership in preparing for the council meetings or just being involved. And that's why perhaps some of the activity is localized amongst the management structure, because the membership, besides that core educational function, and if you've already got that, they don't see what is the value of this network.
Yeah.
So this is something that the network is challenged with, and again, that I think that supply-demand dynamic, that inventory of skills, the resources is a really big part of it. So all of this has contributed to low levels of engagement, and quite honestly, we had, you know, regional focal points saying when they are trying to recruit new members, the argument of why you should join the network is a challenging one to make right now.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have two comments online about the role of the network. One from Demba Ndier, who says, we put as far as the disconnect, well put as far as the disconnect, and the unfulfilled needs in supporting the one on the ground work needed. So what we need is to spread the message and get the environmental work done. That's all we need. Another comment from Bruce Potter. Having followed the CSO network for many years, I think it is a mistake to force its primary agents, the regional focal points, to simultaneously link the GEF national contacts and with their fellow civil society organizations at the both regional and national level. There are too many potential conflicts of interest between government agents and the CSO community for the regional focal points to serve both masters. And it seems that the most useful role is connecting the grassroots to the GEF Council.
Yes, so on that, I think for those that are members of the network, if you're on the phone, this is something that, you know, it's for you to lobby and dialogue and liaise with your regional focal point and the secretariat about the country contact points and what their roles should be, and what activities they should be involved in, and so forth. The idea for country contact points, as we understood it in the evaluation, was that for regional focal points, it's just too difficult to, especially when some of the regions were, you know, 14 countries, for one organization to have the outreach and bring in and exchange information across all of those different countries. So I think this is still very much a work in progress, and I think it still very much could be influenced by the membership as the discussions continue, particularly on the heels of this evaluation and as the ad hoc working group comes back with any recommendations that it might have. But this was one of the more serious issues that we did try to bring to light in the evaluation, was that the link to the country was very, very weak connections with local grassroots CSOs, and this is something that I think that the network is aware of. What we heard from them most often was they were just resource challenged to do much more than they were currently doing. We have another comment here. Mm-hmm. Management has become idealistic for an elite. That's why they can't go high in membership mobilization, let alone without resources. Money is spent in allowing attendees to get into DC, but nothing of that magnitude to set local grassroots networks and community for development activities. Yeah. So I think, yeah, so the council, when it formalized the network in 1995, essentially said that it would pay for 2 representatives to attend the council meetings, or sorry, to pay for representatives to attend the council meetings at twice, the spring meeting and the fall meeting. So the resources that are available to the network at the moment are just that. And that's also something that we talked about in the evaluation, is that the network has tried to do some of its own fundraising. It has developed a medium-sized project, which hasn't really moved into the work program. I think the network is still working on it for capacity building for the whole network. The network did receive some funds in GEF-5 from the Secretariat. I think it was in the order of $50,000 a year, maybe total. I think it was total. And that was used for the review of the public involvement policy. So some of you who are on the phone may remember that the network did a review of the public involvement policy, and that was indicated as, you know, from the evaluations perspective, one of the main results of the network, or in the policy that it has contributed to, combined with the evaluation that our office did of CSO engagement, the network's review of public involvement policy. This has led to the Secretariat forming a working group that was active all of last year. The recommendations of that working group were to actually, and this was made to the council just this past October, to develop a new policy. So the network has had major contributions. The challenge is that they have been at the global policy level and less so at the country level.
Thank you very much for this comment. Any more questions? If any more questions, please post them online or raise your hand. And so we've discussed a lot the role and possibilities of the mission and the future for the network. Maybe we could talk a little bit about is it the new question?
Yeah.
Yes, perfect.
Can we have a strong promise to be doing things differently, meaning local constituencies, networking activities, capacity building can't grow big with just COP21, 22, same thing if nothing is done. Grinding water doesn't yield big results. We need to remobilize leadership and regain momentum. Lots ahead. Africa needs huge support mechanisms, and nothing commensurate is being done. So I would suggest again that if you are a member of the network, that the opportunity to influence the network is now, and through your regional focal point, perhaps to even get involved with the governance of the network itself, and to define how the country contact points are established and what their role is. I think that the network, the working group that the council has put together will also be looking at other networks of similar financial mechanisms to see what's possible there. But I think that really having an agreement with the partnership, with the council, about what is the role of this network now, 20 years later, that will be the fundamental basis and underpinning for what will happen going forward.
Thank you. Any more questions, please? Okay. We might have something online.
Just thank you.
So maybe we could also take a few minutes to talk a little bit about methodology. So you talked a little bit about lessons learned at the end of the presentation. So what are and you've mentioned the importance of using the network perspective while evaluating networks. So in a nutshell, what does it mean to take a network perspective in evaluation?
Well, basically, there are methodologies that we all use in our evaluations, and those are things like interviews, the focus groups, we have surveys. These are common amongst many evaluations. They're not specific to network evaluation. They're not completely new techniques. The network perspective means deploying these standard perspectives, but understanding that, for example, when you're interviewing an individual, that individual is not representing, to make sure that the interview protocols and that there is an understanding that you are not looking for the individual's perspective. You're looking for the organization's perspective or the network perspective. And essentially that goes across to the other tools as well. So designing surveys, not with an individual response in mind, but understanding that the representative here is an organization that's part of a network. So designing the survey to make sure that the questions reflect not that individual perspective. Mm-hmm. I think Sarah's here with me, and she can maybe pipe in with any major sort of learnings of methodology that, for me, the most challenging aspect, which I mentioned, was it's just with such 474 members that are not necessarily always active and that are also moving and leaving. I think that was challenging. We found that within the network itself, their membership criteria has meant that they're reviewing organizations and making sure that everything is as it was when they applied about every, I think, 5 years, which we also suggested was perhaps too long because a lot can happen in 5 years. So in the evaluation, we suggested that they do these checks more frequently because it just meant that some of the organizations or the people, as another caller referenced, have moved on or the organization no longer exists.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think one of the challenges is really to be able to look at different networks as well while we're doing this work, and we did a fairly good amount of that work and see what compares and how to and what's the design of so to speak a perfect network, even though that does not really exist, but to look at what are the elements that make a good network and try to go from there into trying to evaluate what elements are relevant within this CSO network and going off from there.
For those that are interested, Volume 2, which is posted on our website, this is Volume 1 of the evaluation, and Volume 2 is the methodology piece as well as another technical note on comparative networks. So we did review the networks of other environmental organizations like UNEP, Adaptation Fund, GCF, the SIF. So we did share what is prevalent amongst some other entities, and that will also be a reference for the ad hoc working group. But it wasn't in our mandate to do a benchmarking against those.
Thank you. So in the chat room, we now have a link to the report. And we have time for one last question. And I see that Carl Brook raised his hand. So the microphone is yours, Carl.
Well, it's been raised. That's the artifact from before.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. So if there are no more questions, thank you very much for participating. The presentation will be available online as well as recording. We will have another webinar in Spanish at 1 p.m. Washington, D.C. time. So please spread the word with your colleagues. And thank you and goodbye.
Thank you, everybody. Goodbye.